When two people or more have a soul tie, they act alike and everything one person does affects the rest. They influence each other's behaviors and are connected. A soul tie is like a knot in a rope. It's a tying of two soul cords, like shoestrings that links them together. A person cannot tie their soul with one hand. It takes two hands to tie them together. Likewise, when it comes to soul ties, both people are involved. A godly soul tie is legal and pure. It is not parasitic, but is an advantage to all the people involved. All parties benefit positively from the tie. Also, this tie is by the will of the Lord and therefore would be in favor of you. Ungodly relationships are established through illicit or wrong relationships. A soul tie could be formed over time after an intensely close relationship or a spiritual relationship. When a person gets acquainted with the wrong person and the closeness grows to the point that there is a bond between them, that is an ungodly soul tie. The ungodly soul tie does not do a person any favor, but all it does is cause negative occurrences for them. The other person in the tie could start influences that will cause you to do things that are against the will of God. In an ungodly soul tie, the parties cannot do anything without the attention of the soul that he or she is tied to. Sometimes, individuals do not even have the liberty to act of their own free will. They are controlled in every possible way. Ungodly soul ties are relationships that ultimately bring a person into bondage or rob or control a person's will that potentially harms the bond. It is the devil's device to control a believer and make him or her do whatever he wishes. The devil wants you to establish connections and commitments with people outside of God's will for them. This is to stray you away from God's path. Though he may try to do this, God has a way of rescuing you. God always has a means of bringing his children out of every bondage and putting them back on the right path in life. He would never leave you alone to keep drowning in the relationship, but would make sure that you are broken from the bond. No matter the situation, God is there to break it. When you are in an ungodly relationship with a person of the world, they would lead you to do many things that ordinarily are against your principles as a person and as a believer. No matter how much you think your mind is too established and you cannot fall under the influence of the person, you are still very much liable to be affected. Staying around the wrong thing for a long time would make you start doing it either deliberately or not. You would even start making excuses as to why there is absolutely nothing wrong with what you're doing because you now see it as a normal thing. Your mind, will, and emotions are so much tied to the person that everything the person does is right in your sight. You view it all as an okay situation, no matter how wrong it may be. This ungodly tie could lead you to commit grave sins against God and ungodly practices with a person. One of those ties that can be formed is through sexual immorality. Any sexual involvement with that is not our spouse links the two souls together, and this would also keep growing as a tie that led you to make the mistake in the first place. That is how strong a soul tie is. Invisible string knots have been tied between you and the person, and this is why even when you try to break free, there is still this nudge to go back, especially if it had been formed over a long period. The agenda of hell is to make what is ungodly and illegal in the sight of God right and acceptable in the sight of humans. When a person is tied to something or someone, it's not easy for such a person to be able to break free from the connection. Because of the weight of the connection, the person needs another force to be able to have the strength to break it off. In the Bible, the Israelites in Egypt had a very strong ungodly soul tie. The children of Israel were used as slaves for the Egyptians. They tortured and frustrated their work. They even killed their children. Finally, the Lord heard their cry and sent Moses to rescue them from the Egyptians. Moses rescued the Israelites from the Egyptians, and not long after, they started murmuring and complaining to Moses. They believed that what they were experiencing outside Egypt, despite being free from slavery, is worse than being in that bondage. They wanted to return to Egypt. In essence, they were saying they should be there. This was not because their situation was better in Egypt, but because of the bond and tie they had already formed with Egypt. They believed that it was better for them. Despite of slavery, they were already very used to Egypt and did not want to go on to the promised land anymore. It was not easy for them to break ties with a place they had lived in for so many years, and part of this was still longing to go back, even if it was back to suffering. That is why when a person moves on or ends a relationship, years later they're still thinking about that person and cannot break free from that person emotionally because of that bond created. You do not need to necessarily be tied to a person. It can also be to an object, money, or the things of the world. Anything that takes you out of the will of God and you have formed a connection with is an ungodly soul tie. You are so attached to this particular thing that you feel incomplete without it. You will also do anything in your power to make sure that you are continually acquainted with it. Now, it controls your mind, time, energy, and everything about you. It now dictates when you do things and also how you do them. Though it might be just an object, it has so much power over you because of the bond that you have created with it. One of these things that might not even be real is social media. People are so engrossed with their phones that they do not even remember to do the things for themselves or God. It now controls their attitudes and everything that has to do with them. This is also called an addiction, and it's an intervention from God that can free you from it. Once He intercedes, He helps you to focus on other important things so that you can be distracted from that which you have formed this bond with. The only one who can successfully and ultimately break a soul tie is God. He is there to help you through it and make sure that everything connecting you to that person or thing is broken. These ties can be severed by the power of God and also through your decisions to deliberately do away with Him. Just like you decided to be in that bond, you can also make that decision to get out of it. In the same way, God successfully removed Egypt from the hearts of the Israelites and can do the same with you. Through praying to God concerning the ties that you receive supernatural help to break free from them. In your place of prayer, visualize the cord between you and the person or thing breaking, and you will see how much power your mind holds. It may seem foolish at first, however the effect is powerful when done in faith in prayer. Once you pray about it, your freedom can come from other people not being interested in being acquainted with you again, or you suddenly have this overwhelming feeling of freedom. You no longer feel under the control of the person or object. You also have to be wise enough to do away with anything that would bring back a memory or make you remember the bond. This can be a trigger at the point that you're trying to fight off the tie. It can make you go back to the thing that you're trying so hard to stop. You have to make sure that you are only surrounded by pure things that will renew your mind. God can also help you be free through spiritual leaders. They are the people through which God instructs and corrects you. You can open your heart to them and tell them the battle of the mind and will that you are facing, and you will see God instruct and help you through them. Only you can hold the scissors to cut the soul tie and keep it cut if you are ready to receive the help of God. He would not force Himself to do it without you letting Him. Make the conscious effort today to be free.